Hi folks, quick little video today just showing you how with some scrap wood I make my poor man's track saw, let's call it, for circular saws, whether they're cordless, corded, big, small, cheap, expensive. It's a really simple way. So stick around and I'll show you how it's done. Right, so we've probably all seen it before. It's a very, very simple thing to do, and every time I change circular saw, or even if I'm borrowing a larger saw off someone, I will always knock up one of these because it's a really simple way to just do quick cuts. And every circular saw has its own kind of offset from the side of the base plate to the saw blade, to the actual kerf of the blade. So this is something that has been shown endless amount of times in endless videos, so I won't dwell on it too much. But for those who may not have seen it, this, for example, is the one I use on my old saw, and I've made one that's 2.4 meters long, or just over, for doing rips down the whole length of a full sheet. Or this one is just over 1200, so I can do, you know, it's a little bit more manageable if I'm just doing cross cuts. You can also make a very short one if you're just doing little cross cuts through maybe joists or sleepers or something like that. Then you can just make yourself a little jig. I'm going to make up one, and I'm actually going to use this bit of laminate flooring. No reason other than it's left over. And then I've just got a piece of pine. Basically just want a really nice straight piece of wood, and you can make it from the same thing. So if you had some 9mm MDF or ply, you could just cut a strip off like this, and then another thin strip, and then you can use that. But really you need to start with something square. What we're then going to do is just set this from the edge here slightly enough so I've got a clamping space here. Doesn't matter about this much, as long as when the base plate of the saw is butted up against this piece of pine, that the blade is going to actually cut through our base of our track. So we need to just move it across a little bit to about there. We'll say we'll come in 20mm from the edge. Firewood. Right, now I've made a right mess there. Make sure we're set off the same amount. Of course, wood glue is not going to stick to the laminate particularly well, but it's fine. Good. So that's really nicely spaced off. We'll just pop a few more. Tidy up the mess. So the reason I've left that little section there is if I'm just clamping it down to a piece of wood, I can just put one of these clamps on that section and it won't interrupt with the saw. The other reason for having this as thin as possible, as long as it's thicker than the base of your saw, is that if you were to wanting to cut something thicker, quite often saws, the motor sticks out quite a bit, and that can, if this was an inch or 25mm thick, then that would take away from the depth you can cut. So if we just raise it up enough to clear, we're probably, if we lock it off there, we're probably only losing about 5mm of our depth of cut, which is plenty. You're not really going to be using this to cut much thicker than maybe a little bit of worktop. We're now ready. We can take the saw down the other end, and we'll make an initial cut, or the first cut, which is going to reference from this board here across to the 0. All we need to do is just set the depth there to about 10mm, because that's all really we need to cut through. And just make sure you're set to 0 so we've got a nice straight cut. What we've now taken off is just that excess piece. So we now have got our poor man's track saw, really. So we know that every time we pop this on a piece of sheet material, and we then stick our saw on there. Wherever the edge of this board is going to be our cut line. There you go. If I just lift it up, you can see that as I slide it along, the blade is just kissing that edge all the way along, and that shouldn't ever change, providing you stick to the same saw. So there we go. It doesn't get much more simple than that. Now we can get stuck into our coffee machine cabinet build, and this will be the first thing to be used to start ripping down our sheet goods. So that wasn't an attempt to reinvent the wheel. These have been around for years doing this sort of jig, but it has to be one of the most useful to do. And you can use these for running your router along, and you can also use them if you're cutting grooves in boards to create sort of a shiplap look. And I've got plenty of projects I've done that on up in the loft conversion series, so have a search for those if you want to see how I used it for that. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Remember, if you can, do it yourself, and we'll see you next time.